Trust Me Travel presents a series of travel narratives from around the world entitled Travel Time with Robert and Tracy. This narrative is for the islands in the eastern Atlantic, the Azores, Madeira, and the Canary Islands. Located off the coast of Europe and northern Africa, these group of islands is known as Macaronesia. This is the Azores we are going to visit first. Our first island we'll visit is São Miguel. São Miguel is part of the Azores, which is part of Portugal. And in fact, some of the largest mountains in all of Portugal are in the Azores Islands. Ponta de Galda is the capital city of the Azores, but we're off to see the countryside as well.
Und im Frühjahr wieder umgekehrt, also im Herbst wieder umgekehrt. Aber Blauwale, Finnwale.
Our tour guide for this little excursion speaks German. He does have a couple of Germans with us. But the Azores have pineapple plantations. Well, maybe not like you think of Hawaii. They're all grown inside in a greenhouse and are quite small, but they are highly prized in Europe. They also have banana plantations. And these, look like bananas grown elsewhere, a little smaller perhaps. The Azores are quite far north for this sort of cultivation, but they're surrounded by the Gulf Stream, which keeps them warm. And it's also the Gulf Stream that helps their fishing economy. They have all of these quaint little fishing villages throughout the region. This one here happens to be in a sheltered little coast. Up the hill from here is a church called the Lady of Peace Chapel, dedicated to the local fishermen who hope for peaceful and calm waters as they go out and ply their trade.
But no brown bears, no. Just small rabbits. No wild animals.
Our tour guide has told us there's no real large animals on the island. There never were. When the islands were discovered 600 years ago by the Portuguese, they were quickly populated by animals brought from Europe, including plants that you see here. But one of the great things about the Azores is its volcanic origin. These are all tops of volcanoes out in the middle of the Atlantic, and so there's lots of volcanic type activity. And think of this like Yellowstone in the Atlantic, complete with geysers, boiling pots, mud pots, etc. Watch this here.
Wait and see. There we go. Look at that. Look at that.
Apparently, the sparks from the cigarette ignite volatiles within the volcanic gases. We're driving to the other side of the island. You can see a much nicer change in the weather. There's the leeward side and the windward side. We're now on the windward side, as it were. The locals are quite proud of their dairy industry. They will tell you that they supply most of the milk and cheese for Europe. Hard to believe out of a little island, but they do have a lot of cows. They also have this tea plantation. You can come out here and watch them kind of snip the leaves off of these rows of tea plants. After they've collected the fresh cut leaves, they put them into these drying and sorting machines, all imported from England nearly 200 years ago.
Ponta de Galda exists only from the main street. There are the coffees, there are the cities, the rest.
Driving through a little town on the far side of the island, we stop here at this beach, world famous for surfing, they tell us, and I believe it. It's quite nice. Our next stop is off to see Madeira. Madeira is also a Portuguese island, Portuguese colony as it were, quite a bit different from the Azores farther south, and famous more for its Madeira wine. We'll talk about that in a minute. Fuchella is the main city on the Azores, And they have an interesting little demonstration here. This is a galleon. All of these islands out here in the Atlantic were settled by sailors and colonists traveling on these small ships. And you look at this and you think, my gosh, they were brave. But they are here now, and the towns and the islands are quite nicely populated. Tourism, of course, is the major source of income for many of these people. We're taking a tram ride up to the top of the hills here. One of the great things that Madeira has is what is called a toboggan ride. And you take this tram up to the top, walk through this little community called Monte to this toboggan. And these are not snow toboggans, these are wooden toboggans. Watch this. It's our turn, and this is what it looks like going down with these two guides to keep you in the road, looking out for walls and everything else. The guides actually steer the toboggan, or the sled as you'd call it, and, keep you safe.
Bumper cars.
Bumper cars. Oh dear.
Quite a bit of fun. There's quite a bit of grape cultivation, of course. They have the famous Madeira wine. The grapes grow on the drier side. All the rain falls on the wetter side, so they've created these very large irrigation systems to transport the water from one side of the island to the next. Madeira wine is a fortified wine, meaning it's had alcohol that's been distilled and added to it as well. We are now off to see Nuns Valley. We are at the Nuns Valley Overlook, and we're standing on top of a cliff looking down at Nuns Valley. It's quite a little population area with vineyards and grapes, but it is really way down, and you get the scale of the size of these islands here from this overlook. Our next stop is quite a bit different from our first two. These are the Canary Islands, part of Spain here. The one that we will first visit is Lanzarote, and it's not heavily populated, but it is very dramatic. If you look at this photograph from space, you can see all this darkness. Those are volcanoes. Tourism is quite important here. This is Arrecife, has a few medium-sized hotels, but the interior of the island is what you come to see.
Is a copy of the cultivation method used in Lajeria, applied to other areas of the island. Although in this case, characterizing Lanzarote is its volcanic appearance, making the island known as the Volcano Island.
We've hired a taxi driver who has very limited English, but the Taxi Association has this pre-recorded tour. You tell them the language you want, they plug it in and drive you around. It's quite nice. This is a monument to the settlement of the island, to the agricultural workers. This is all buried below the surface. There's volcanic ash on top, add as insulation. This is the Agricultural Workers Monument. As you drive through here, you can see the agriculture. This is a vineyard. These little stone walls surrounded by lava rock help insulate it. We are now arriving at the town of Macha Blanca. In the 19th century, to the west of here, the volcanoes erupted. The lava flows came towards this church. They held out the saint of the church. The lava stopped and saved the area. But these volcanoes destroyed much of the better agricultural land, and this has now become a national park. and this volcanic region in which you drive through is just utter devastation. Big tour buses here, you have to get off your tour bus and get on a park sponsored bus, and they drive you through the park. In 1730 and 1736, these volcanoes erupted, destroying much of the better agricultural land, as I indicated, and just covered this area with this moonscape-like area. Very interesting to drive through and see. The area is still actively volcanic. You don't see any eruptions, but if you take some old weeds like this and put them down by the hot rock, you get fire. The islands are located about 80 miles off the coast of Morocco, North Africa. Camels were brought here long ago. Today they're used to help tourists see the island. We're driving through the vineyard area. Most people think of vineyards with poles and grapevines. These grapes grow so close to the ground to keep the warmth, and the lava rock over the top keeps them hydrated. We taste the vintage, go out and admire the, as it were, sunset across the grapevines. They use this ash, this lava rock, simply as kind of a mulch to keep the moisture into the soil. This island is a unique visit. I would say it's a must-see just to see this sort of a thing. As you sit out on the patio and enjoying your glass of wine, looking out here and realizing the amount of effort to produce that vintage makes it even more special. We are going to visit another island in the Canaries. This one is Tenerife. It is a much larger island, has a very tall volcano in the middle of it, and so it has a lot more greenery. But it also has these dramatic cliffs, the gigantic cliffs, the cliffs of the giants as they were. And, again, this is a volcanic island. But as you come up here on top of the shoulder of the volcano, as it were, overlook it, it looks nothing like the other Canary we just visited. And in fact, as you drive up these winding roads, you will soon exceed the tree line. They have a little national park up here. This was a very famous place to visit if you were a naturalist in the 18th century. As we're driving through the local little towns and villages, there's several along the way around the island. You can see the European feel for it. Of course, this is a Spanish island. They speak Spanish. Money's in euros. We're visiting some of the local churches. Again, a little bit of the European style graffiti you see everywhere. We're here in the town of La Orotava. It's famous for its balconies, but also because of this church. A monastery connected to the church is now the local history museum. One of the few agricultural products that is sent out from Tenerife is bananas, again similar to what we saw up in the Azores. Tenerife's main city is Puerto de la Cruz. This is the tourist destination, the beach destination. This is very much a volcanic island, so the beaches tend to be black sand. But as you walk down in the beach front, you can see this black sand. The people here are enjoying it. Most of these people are from England and Europe as well. Very popular. Tourism is by far the largest industry of these islands. But as we leave the Canary Islands, we get a chance to see a local group of folk dancers. A nice way to say goodbye to the Canaries. We are on our way to the mainland of Europe. We are going to visit Spain. But that's another time on Travel Time with Robert and Tracy, presented by Trust Me Travel. We have a large selection of travel videos on trustmewithtravel.com. So join us there, trustmewithtravel.com. Robert and Tracy wish you happy travels.